Before starting this video, I do want to give a thank you to my patrons that support the channel. And if you would like to support the channel, there are some great benefits for you in the link down below. So with that, let's get into today's video.
We want it. We need it. We must have the precious. They stole it from us. Sneaky legal hobbits, wicked, tricksy, and false.
What's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on PubStompMTG. Today I wanted to share my thoughts and impressions on Smeagol helpful guide and a guide for you to build a deck around him. So he is in Golgari colors, black and green, which is pretty good colors, especially for a little bit of a lands theme. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died under your control, the ring tempts you. Also, whenever the ring tempts you, target opponent reveals the top card of their library until they reveal a land card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped under your control and put the rest into their graveyard. So like some of the cards in the set, this is absolutely flavorful to the character Smeagol. With the ring tempting him more and more creatures are dying because of him and for the lust he does have for the ring. Also, I do like the idea of him stealing lands because he goes into lands left and right, sneaking his way across and also helping Frodo and Sam along the process. So there are a couple themes we're going to come across in this deck. Of course, the ring tempting Smeagol is absolutely flavorful. He did have the ring for 500 years. I'll also dive into a little bit of aristocrats, mainly because we want our creatures dying so that their ring can tempt us more. Also, on top of that, we might as well go into a landfall theme because we're going to be stealing lands left and right, having them enter on the battlefield on our side. Plus, Smeagol could actually be a win con in himself. He makes our opponents mill until they reveal a land card and putting it on our battlefield tapped. Especially if our opponents have a low land count in their decks, we can mill them for a lot and they could possibly lose to mill. So first, I did want to dive into some thematic choices, some things that deal with Smeagol specifically, or Golem should I say. So there's a lot of great removal options. We're going to name a couple here, like Claim the Precious, Golem's Bite, and Go for the Throat. I do like Claim the Precious, even though it's a sorcery speed removal at 3 mana, the ring tempts you is a great ability for Golem to trigger. Also, Golem's Bite acts for removal, and if it's in the graveyard, you could exile it from your graveyard, then the ring tempts you. Also, I thought of throwing in Go for the Throat mainly because it's a great removal spell. For 2 mana, you destroy target non-artifact creature. Plus, the art looks absolutely terrifying. I was actually terrified of Golem as a kid. I always had nightmares that he would sneak into my room all slimy like he would, and then he would just go for the throat like that image right there. I did also want to talk about Smeagol's counterpart, Golem. We do have 2 different versions in this deck, Golem Patient Plotter and Golem Scheming Guide. Golem Patient Plotter is absolutely fantastic. When it leaves the battlefield, the ring tempts you, and it also does have a sack outlet in the graveyard. You could pay black, sacrifice a creature, return Golem from your graveyard to your hand, activate it only as a sorcery. So what's nice about this Golem, you could sacrifice him for sack fodder, and then later on you could sacrifice another creature so that you could put him from the graveyard to your hand. I do also like the fun interaction Golem Scheming Guide has. It has that ability of giving you a card draw in a form of a riddle. So I do think it's a fun inclusion to add to the deck. I did also want to mention great sack fodder with Haunt of the Dead Marshes. When it enters the battlefield, you scry 1, and it has ability pay 2 and black, return it from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped, activate only if you control a legendary creature like Smeagol, for example. So say for example you have Smeagol on the battlefield with Haunt of the Dead Marshes on the battlefield and a sacrifice outlet. You could sacrifice Haunt of the Dead Marshes and then return to the battlefield for 3 mana. If you had like 9 or so mana, you could do this 3 times over, sacrificing it so that you could scry some more, and then you could get that trigger for Smeagol. I did want to bring your attention to a sweet reanimation card with Rise of the Witch King. So this essentially acts as removal. You will have to sacrifice a creature by yourself, and if you do, you could return a creature card from the graveyard to the battlefield. That's excellent value and pretty flavorful, so this would definitely be a great include in the deck. Also, if we are milling our opponents left and right, we might as well use Shadow of the Enemy. For 6 mana, exile all creature cards from target player's graveyard. You may cast spells among those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast them. So again, we're utilizing Smeagol's ability to mill our opponents so that we could get lands on our battlefield. We could take advantage of that and have a lot of lands on our battlefield to cast big spells. Also, what's really nice about this card, it's not for until end of turn. This is any time you could cast a spell, so this is a great card to add into the deck, mainly because we have a lot of mill synergies. I do feel, however, the best card in the deck will be Call for the Ring. So for 2 mana, at the beginning of your upkeep, the ring tempts you. Whenever you choose a creature as your ring bearer, you may pay 2 life. If you do, you draw a card. This might be simple at first, but it's pretty powerful and sneakily underrated, mainly because at the beginning of your upkeep, the ring tempts you, and when the ring tempts us, and if we have Smeagol on the battlefield, battlefield, we can mill our opponent until we get a land card so that we can put it tapped on our battlefield. Plus, we can get some sweet card draw as well whenever we choose a ring bearer. With that said, lands are going to be entering the battlefield left and right because of Golem's ability of stealing lands from our opponents. We might as well take advantage of that. We do have some great cards like Bloodghast and Skyclave Shade. Both of these have that ability. For example, with Bloodghast, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may return Bloodghast from your graveyard to the battlefield. So for example, if we do have a sack outlet on the battlefield and we have Smeagol on the battlefield as well, we could sacrifice Bloodghast to that sack outlet. Then Smeagol's triggered ability of the ring tempting us can happen at the beginning of our end step. Then Bloodghast will return from the graveyard to the battlefield because of Smeagol's ability of taking lands from our opponent's deck. I would say, however, Skyclave Shade is a little worse. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if Skyclave Shade is in your graveyard and it's your turn, you may cast it from your graveyard this turn. So it's definitely not better than Bloodghast, but it is a good option to have. Since we are having a lot of lands enter the battlefield with Smeagol's ability left and right, we could use Scoot Swarm and Avenger of Zendikar. I'm not the biggest fan of Scoot Swarm, but he would absolutely be insane in the deck, mainly because we're having lands enter the battlefield left and right. Scoot Swarm is going to trigger so much, and we can use those Scoot Swarms as sack fodder for Golem to trigger again. Also, I do have to say, Avenger of Zendikar will be a game ender in a way where it enters the battlefield, you create 0/1 green plant creature tokens for each land you control. It also does have a game-ending landfall ability. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a 1/1 counter on each plant creature token you control. So if we do have lands entering the battlefield left and right, Avenger of Zendikar could be a growing threat for us to win the game. I also did want to dive into some aristocrat strategies like Woe Strider and Viscera Seer, mainly because they have that ability to sacrifice another creature with no other clause. We don't have to tap them, we don't have to do anything else by paying mana, we could just sacrifice a creature to gain value. Since we are sacrificing so much creatures, we might as well have Blood Artist and Zulaport Cutthroat in the deck, mainly so that we could drain our opponents for life. I did want to briefly discuss some game-winning cards so that you could put them in your deck so that there's some way for you to win the game so that you can move on to the next one. So because you are milling your opponents a lot, Rise of the Dark Realms is absolutely incredible. Put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. Because of Smeagol's ability, we're going to be milling our opponents for so much. We can have a lot of creatures in our own graveyard and a lot of creatures in their own graveyard as well, so that we can reanimate them to win the game. In a similar fashion, I did want to include Sheoldred because she has an amazing array of abilities. So for 5 mana, she does have Menace. When she enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature or planeswalker. Plus, you could pay 5, exile Sheoldred, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control, activate it only as a sorcery, and if the opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, which is going to be pretty easy because of Smeagol's ability. This will then turn her into the saga, The True Scriptures. So this has 3 different lore abilities. For the first one, it does read, for each opponent, destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker that player controls. The second lore ability reads, each opponent discards 3 cards, then mills 3 cards. Then for the last lore chapter, put all creatures from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control, then exile the True Scriptures, then return it to the battlefield. So yeah, I don't think I need to explain how busted this is. This is a great include in any Smeagol deck if I've ever seen one. However, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Smeagol Helpful Guide. Overall, I do like what they did with this character with Smeagol and some of the other Golem cards. They're absolutely flavorful and on point. Smeagol Helpful Guide is definitely the best one out of the bunch. He does have a great array of abilities with the ring tempting us, and on top of that with a little bit of a landfall theme, and on top of that with aristocrats. However, let me know down below, what do you think of Smeagol Helpful Guide? Is there any other commanders that you haven't seen me put on a video that you would like to see on a video? Let me know down below. Also, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe, and with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.